will the dog listen if we don't use the e-collar anymore? Or when can we fade out the training tools, right? When can we stop using treats? When can we stop using a prong collar, right? Et cetera, right? And it's a totally understandable question most of the time, right? It's a normal question. Like, when can I stop using these things, right? Am I going to be contingent on it for the rest of my life? And the biggest thing I tell everybody is you got to walk before you run, right? You can't get 17 steps ahead of the game. Right? First and foremost, anytime we start training with a dog, whether it's we're working handling things and like nail trim related stuff, whether it's we're doing just obedience training, whether we're doing off-leash training, whether we're doing whatever, trick training, stuff like that, the progression to fading out training tools is slow and meticulous. Meticulous, is that the right word?
Meticulous.
Meticulous? Did I use it correctly?
I think you did.
All right, cool. It's slow and that word.
And that word.
And the reason for that is because before we worry about the tools, we have to focus on the behavior, right? So let's say in this example, the target goal is I want to be able to do the dog's nails. Just do them, right? We have put in place a plan for how we can do the nails, how we could be safe while we're doing the nails, and how we could enforce the process of doing the nails, right? Whether that's we use a muzzle, whether that's we use treats to reward the process, whether that's we use a correction if the dog is acting out too much, whatever it may be, right? Whatever it may be. What we need to do is we need to use those tools until the dog is consistently performing the behavior or allowing us to do the nails or recalling when we need them to, or whatever it may be, until they're doing that 100% of the time perfectly with the tools on.
Yep.
Right? Once we've hit a point where we are 100% consistent with the tools on, we could tell the dog is doing it with a good state of mind. We could tell that they are no longer needing the consistent reinforcement, whether in the form of positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment, whatever it is that we're using to enforce things. From there, we could slowly start fading tools out, right? So let's look at individual tools here, right? A muzzle, right? I tell everybody when we're working with dogs that need a muzzle, if a dog is a bite risk, right? We should use the muzzle until it feels fucking stupid that we're even using it.
Yeah.
Right? Until we hit a point where it's like, God, like this is so dumb I'm even putting this on because this dog hasn't even shown an inkling of aggression in so long and this and that, right? And I would argue that every trainer, regardless of how you train, would agree with that, right? When we're working with dogs with a bite risk, whether you're doing it in a force-free approach or whatever, using the muzzle is the most important part, right? Now, a lot of dogs can progress to no longer needing it. I'm very sure that the owner and myself will be able to do this dog's nails without the muzzle, no problem. We do it all the time with board and trains where they start on muzzle and then we don't need it later. Very normal, right? But you get into, let's say, vet visits. Let's say grooming. You're taking the dog to a groomer. You're taking the dog to outside people that are going to need to handle the dog. I still choose to use a muzzle with my dogs. And you could argue all day long, does that mean they're not fixed? Does that mean that they're bad still, this, that? No, it just means I'm being responsible. That's it, right? So don't be in a rush to fade out the muzzle, right? Prong collar, right? Same concept, right? We could use a prong collar and we use it as a training tool to teach a behavior, whether it's, let's say, walking in a heel position, right? And let's say you hit a point where you put that prong collar on and you've consistently for 5 months gone for walks and not even needed to use the prong collar, and the dog walks beautifully with you and like everything is good and fine and dandy and stuff like that. At that point, could you choose to fade that training tool out? You absolutely could. Here's the problem though, right? I still recommend using the training tool in that situation because let's say you go for a walk and then because the dog has been consistent for 5 months, you go another 3 months and the dog doesn't even realize the thing isn't on and walks perfectly with you. But then 3 months later, the dog pulls a little bit and they realize, I got away with that.
Yeah.
And then, 2 weeks later, they pull a little bit more. They're like, oh, I got away with that. And then suddenly you start that slippery slope back to what it was before.
Yeah.
I use the prong collar long term, or whatever tool you're using. Personally, it's e-collars, not prong collars. I use it long term, not because I need it, but because inevitably there will be a time I need to reinforce the behavior. And I want to make sure I'm in a position to reinforce it so the dog doesn't learn to blow me off.
Yeah.
Same concept with e-collar. You could have a freaking perfect recall off of the leash, but inevitably at some point in the dog's 14 years that they're going to be alive, right? Or longer or shorter or whatever, right? There's going to be a time that they blow you off. And if they learn that they could blow you off with no reinforcement behind it, it will get stronger and it will start the slippery slope back. Now, all of the force-free community loves to throw that argument out there. If you didn't have the e-collar on, the dog wouldn't listen. If you didn't have the muzzle on, you couldn't do it. This, that, whatever. It goes both ways. Behavior is contingent on consistent reinforcement, meaning if you're taking a force-free approach, say you're only using treats and you train this dog perfectly, which is fine, right? Totally fine, right? But if you just take away the treats forever, if you take them away forever, the dog will not listen. How long are you going to go to work for if you stop getting a paycheck?
Not very long.
Not that long. Not that long.
Nope.
Right? So whatever tool it is that you use, right? If you take away the tool indefinitely, right, it won't work anymore.
Yeah.
The dog will not listen anymore. That's just the way it works.
Yeah.
It's literally just the way it works. Now, you can get into, there's reinforcement schedules and stuff like that. Basically, what a reinforcement schedule is, especially if you're using treats, is you kind of vary where and when you give rewards to keep them constantly guessing, maybe I'll get something. And that's what a lot of force-free trainers argue, is that if you're doing good enough variable reward schedules and random reward schedules and stuff like that, that eventually the dog won't ever really need a treat because they're constantly thinking they might get one next time. You tell me how that works for you.
Yeah.
Tell me how that works for you. It'll work in the short term. It will work in the short term because when we used to do Mondio ring, for example, you couldn't use any tools while you were out on the field. And when you're training for like a Mondio 3, for example, which is the highest level of it, your dog may be working for 45, 50 minutes straight without any sort of reward, correction, anything like that, right? And that's how we train for that, is through random and variable reward cycles by essentially creating these cues for the dog that make them think they're about to get rewarded so they keep having that energy to go. But that's for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? That's for 45 minutes, not for like 4 years.
Yeah.
So whatever. So that's kind of my answer to that question. Is to answer the question in the short term, yes, the owner was able to do the nails that day. Right? So they can, right? Will they be able to do it without the tools? Yeah, they will. But why would you want to fade them out?
Yeah.
There's no reason.
No reason.